Hello? It's me, Clyde. If you're new here, I tend to wander into places where not much happens, and then I stay there long enough for even less to happen. This is one of those moments. If you're already familiar with my boring adventures, then you know exactly what you're in for, and you've probably already found a comfortable position to slowly forget what time it is. Before we go any further, right now, while you're still awake enough to remember, go ahead and click like and subscribe to the channel. That way you can relax and let yourself drift without worrying you'll forget later. I have a full playlist of these sleepy, uneventful travels, all gathered together, waiting patiently for whenever you need them. And if you ever decide to become a channel member, you're not just helping support these quiet little journeys. You also get something rather nice in return. I can create a personalized sleepy story just for you. One of my boring adventures, shaped specifically to help you rest. All right, let's slow things down. Right now, I'm standing in the snow just outside an abbey in what I believe is 12th century France. I say I believe because time is rarely labeled, and no one here seems particularly interested in clarifying it for me. The stone walls rise up in that calm, confident way that old buildings have, as if they know they'll still be standing long after everyone currently inside them has finished their daily routines and gone quietly to bed. The snow is fresh. Not dramatic snow. Not the kind that demands attention. Just enough to soften the ground, to hush footsteps, and to preserve a series of footprints leading away from the abbey doors and into the pale early light of morning. I'm following them. Slowly. They might belong to a monk or a sheep. Possibly both if the sheep was feeling especially purposeful earlier. The footprints wander slightly, hesitate once or twice, and then continue on as though whoever or whatever made them change their mind halfway through and decided that continuing forward was simpler than turning back. I understand that feeling. The air smells faintly of cold stone, wood smoke, and something bread-like. Maybe barley, maybe yesterday's porridge. Somewhere nearby, a bell has already rung once this morning, though not urgently. More as a suggestion than a command. I pull my cloak a little closer, not because it helps much, but because it feels like the correct thing to do in a place like this, and I take another slow step forward, careful not to disturb the footprints too much. It feels rude to erase evidence of a quiet mystery before fully appreciating it. No one else seems to be outside yet. Just the abbey, the snow, the footprints, and me. And that feels like a very good place to begin. The footprints don't seem to be in a rush. That's the first thing I notice as I follow them away from the abbey walls. They're evenly spaced, not deep, not panicked. Whoever made them wasn't running late, or running from anything. Each step presses gently into the snow, just enough to leave a clear shape, but not enough to suggest urgency. It's the sort of walking done by someone who knows exactly where they're going, or someone who has nowhere else they need to be. I relate to both. The snow crunches quietly under my boots as I move forward, slow enough that my breath has time to fog the air and then disappear before the next one comes along. The cold doesn't bite so much as it lingers. It settles into the stone, into the ground, into the idea of the place, the kind of cold that monasteries are very familiar with. To my left, the abbey stretches outward, low stone buildings connected by covered walkways, roofs heavy with snow. The architecture is simple, purposeful, nothing decorative unless it absolutely needs to be. Even the windows seem modest, letting out just a little golden light, as if the monks inside don't want to waste warmth or attention. Somewhere within those walls, I know the day has already begun. In the 12th century, monasteries don't sleep in the way most people imagine sleeping. Night and morning blend together through bells and prayers. Someone would have risen hours ago for matins, pulling on a wool habit in the dark, whispering prayers that sound almost like breathing. By now, lords may already be finished, or nearly finished. Time here moves according to bells, not clocks, which is ironic considering my personal interests. The footprints veer slightly to the right, heading toward what looks like a narrow path between snow-dusted hedges. One print is a little wider than the others. That's interesting. Either the walker favors one foot, or this really is a sheep who briefly reconsidered its life choices. I pause for a moment and look around, half expecting to see wool somewhere nearby. Sheep were extremely important to places like this. Monasteries kept them not just for food, but for wool, warm habits, blankets, trade. A single sheep wandering off wouldn't be unheard of. I don't see one. What I do see is a small wooden bucket sitting upside down near the wall, its rim frosted over. Someone probably left it there after fetching water before the cold got worse. Or maybe they set it down to adjust their gloves and forgot about it entirely. Objects get forgotten easily in places where routines repeat every day. I step around the bucket carefully, not wanting to disturb it. It feels like it's part of the scene now, like it belongs exactly where it is. The footprints continue on, patient and quiet, leading me further away from the Abbey doors. And I follow them, because there's nothing else pressing enough to do. And because, so far, this feels like exactly the right pace. The footprints lead me farther from the Abbey than I expected. Not far in any urgent sense. Just far enough that the building begins to feel less like a presence and more like a memory. It's still there, of course. Solid. Watching. But now it's quiet in a different way, as though it's decided I can manage on my own for a few minutes. The path narrows slightly, pressed down by repeated use. Boots, sandals, hooves. Probably all three over time. Snow fills in the edges but leaves the center just a little smoother, as if the ground remembers where people usually walk. I pause when a bell rings. Not loud. Not close. Just a single, low note drifting through the cold air like it took a wrong turn on the way to somewhere else. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. The sound hangs there for a moment, then thins out, stretched long by distance and frost. Someone inside the Abbey will be adjusting their sleeve right now. Another person will be sitting straighter. A few will sigh quietly, already tired, even though the day has barely begun. Bells do that. They remind you where you're supposed to be without asking if you agree. My breath fogs again, slower this time. I match it to my steps without really trying. In, step, out, step. The rhythm feels borrowed, like I've picked it up from the place itself. That's when I notice the crow. He's perched on a low stone wall to my right, feathers puffed out, looking mildly offended by winter. His head tilts as I move, one dark eye fixed on me with the unmistakable expression of someone who has decided I'm suspicious, but not suspicious enough to interrupt breakfast. Crows were common around monasteries. Smart birds. Opportunistic. They knew when bread might be dropped, when scraps might appear, when people were too focused on prayer to notice a beak moving quickly. This one hops once along the wall. Then again. He lets out a soft, irritated sound, like he was hoping I'd brought something more interesting with me. I apologize to him quietly. Not out loud, just internally. It feels polite. The footprints curve again, this time toward a small cluster of bare trees. Their branches are thin and dark, scribbling against the pale sky. Snow clings to them unevenly, heavy in some places, completely absent in others, as though it fell and then changed its mind. Under one of the trees, something small rests half buried in snow. I stop and crouch, not quickly, just carefully, and brush away a little powder with my glove. A wooden spoon. Simple, worn, smooth. One edge slightly darker than the rest, probably from years of stirring something hot and repetitive. Porridge, maybe. or soup. Monks ate simply, especially in winter. Meals were quiet, functional. Food as fuel, not entertainment. I leave the spoon where it is. Whoever dropped it may come looking, or they may already have accepted its absence and moved on. Either way, it doesn't need my help. The crow hops down into the snow behind me, testing it with one foot, then the other. He seems unimpressed by the texture. I continue following the footprints, letting them set the pace. Slow, even, unconcerned. And for now, so am I. The footprints eventually lead me back toward the Abbey, though not directly. They curve in a thoughtful way, like whoever made them wasn't quite ready to return just yet. I recognize that hesitation immediately. It's the kind that happens when the outside air still feels more honest than the inside walls. The path opens into a cloister garden, mostly asleep under snow. The square shape is still visible, even softened like this, with narrow stone walkways framing a center that's currently doing nothing at all. No herbs poking through, no careful tending, just snow, smooth and untouched, as if the garden has politely excused itself until spring. I step into the cloister and stop. Sound behaves strangely here. My boots make almost no noise on the stone, but the absence of sound feels louder than it should. Every breath I take seems to hang in the air longer, like it's unsure where to go next. Cloisters were built this way on purpose. The design encourages reflection, repetition, silence. It's architecture that asks you to slow down whether you want to or not. The footprints cross the stone, lightly dusted with snow, then disappear entirely near one of the covered walkways. That's disappointing. I was hoping for more guidance, but I suppose footprints can only do so much. A monk passes at the far end of the cloister, moving slowly, head slightly bowed, hands tucked into his sleeves. He doesn't look at me. That's not rude, it's practical. Silence is valued here. Eye contact can feel almost noisy. His habit brushes the stone softly as he goes. Wool on limestone, a sound so subtle it barely qualifies as one. In the 12th century, monks followed a strict rhythm: prayer, work, silence, reading, more silence. The idea wasn't to escape the world entirely, but to quiet it enough to notice what remained. Some copied manuscripts by candlelight, carefully shaping letters they'd never sign. Others tended sheep or brewed ale or repaired roofs. All of it mattered. None of it needed applause. I wander along the edge of the cloister, my fingers brushing the cold stone wall. It's uneven, chiseled by hands that probably ached afterward. There's something comforting about that. Knowing the wall exists because someone stood here centuries ago, tired, focused, and doing the job anyway. A faint smell drifts through the covered walkway. Wax. Old wood. Something warm being prepared somewhere out of sight. Maybe bread. Maybe soup. Maybe just hot water pretending to be more interesting than it is. I pause near a stone bench dusted with snow and sit down carefully, testing the temperature with a cautious shift of weight. It's cold. Not aggressively so. Just enough to remind me I won't be staying long. Across the cloister, a pigeon flutters suddenly from a beam, clearly startled by something extremely minor. He circles once, then lands again, looking embarrassed by the whole event. I pretend not to notice. It feels polite. The cloister remains quiet. The footprints are gone now, but that doesn't feel like the end of anything. It just feels like the part where I stop following and start lingering. And lingering here seems encouraged. After sitting for a while longer than necessary, and then a little longer than that, I stand and follow one of the covered walkways toward a door that's slightly ajar. It doesn't invite me in exactly. It just fails to stop me, which feels like permission enough in a place where most things are decided quietly. Inside, the air changes immediately. It's warmer, but not by much, just enough to soften the cold at the edges. The smell is what arrives first, really. Old wood, melted wax, dust that's been disturbed, and then carefully allowed to settle again. If patience had a scent, I think this would be it. This is the scriptorium. Long wooden tables line the room, their surfaces worn smooth by elbows and years and the careful sliding of parchment. A few monks sit spaced far apart, each one hunched slightly forward, as though leaning too far might disturb the words forming beneath their hands. No one speaks. No one even looks around. All attention is poured into the slow act of copying. Ink, letter by letter, again and again. In the 12th century, books don't multiply themselves. Every page is an act of quiet endurance. A monk dips his quill into ink made from soot and gall, wipes the excess carefully, and forms a letter that he's written 1,000 times before, and still treats like it matters. Because it does. I walk slowly along the wall, careful not to let my boots announce me. One monk pauses, stretches his fingers, then resumes, the faint scratch of quill against parchment sounding louder than it probably should. Another blinks slowly, as if waking from a thought that went on longer than intended. A small sand timer sits near the edge of one desk. The sand falls so gradually it feels more symbolic than useful. Someone must turn it now and then. Or maybe they forget, and it simply exists to remind them that time is doing something, whether anyone checks or not. That feels familiar. Near a window, a cat sleeps curled tightly around itself, tail wrapped over its nose. Monasteries often kept cats, not for companionship exactly, but for mice. This one seems to have decided that his work is complete for the morning, or possibly for the rest of the season. Snow light filters through the glass, pale and diffuse, landing on the parchment like it's trying not to interrupt. I stop beside an empty desk and rest my hand on the edge of it. The wood is smooth, warmed slightly by proximity. It feels steady. No one notices me standing there. That's all right. The bell rings again somewhere deep in the Abbey. Another gentle reminder of structure, of sequence, of knowing what comes next, even if it's always the same. I linger a moment longer, breathing in the quiet labor of it all, before stepping back toward the door. Outside, the snow will still be waiting. The footprints, if they're still there, won't mind being followed later. For now, this room is enough. I leave the scriptorium the same way I entered it, slowly and without announcing myself. The door closes behind me with a sound so soft it feels like the building is trying not to wake itself up. The warmth fades almost immediately, replaced by the steady, honest cold of stone corridors that have never pretended to be cozy. The hallway smells faintly of bread. Not fresh bread. Not exciting bread. Just bread that exists. The kind that's been baked every day for so long that no one remembers the first time it happened. In the 12th century, monasteries took bread seriously. It was simple, reliable, and deeply unremarkable. Which is exactly why it worked. I follow the smell without much effort. It leads me toward a narrow passage that opens into what I assume is a work area, somewhere between a kitchen and a storage room, not meant for lingering. A few loaves rest on a rough wooden table, dark crusts dusted lightly with flour. One has been torn rather than cut, leaving an uneven edge that suggests someone was either very hungry or very distracted. Possibly both. A lay brother passes through the room carrying a bundle of wool nearly as large as he is. He nods once, not at me exactly, but in my general direction, and continues on without slowing. The wool smells faintly of sheep and cold air and the outdoors. Monasteries like this one relied heavily on wool. Sheep were wealth, warmth, and routine all wrapped into one quietly stubborn animal. Somewhere outside, I hear a bleat, That answers at least one of my earlier questions. I step back out into the open air, pulling my cloak closer again out of habit more than necessity. The sheep are gathered near a low stone wall, their breath visible in small clouds as they shift and stomp and generally disagree with winter. A young monk stands nearby, watching them with the tired patience of someone who has had this exact assignment many times before. He doesn't look bored, just steady. Monastic rules varied, but silence was almost always part of them. Talking was limited, necessary speech only. No commentary, no complaints. I imagine this monk has learned how to think entire conversations without ever moving his mouth. It seems like a useful skill. A few breadcrumbs dot the snow near the wall. I'm not sure who dropped them, perhaps from breakfast, perhaps intentionally for the birds, but a sparrow hops in cautiously, followed by another. They peck quickly, nervously, aware that quiet places still have rules. I stand there longer than needed, watching sheep chew thoughtfully and birds negotiate crumbs and breath drift upward and vanish. No one asks me what I'm doing. No one tells me to move along. Time stretches, softens, loses its edges. And I realize that whatever made those original footprints may have already gone back inside, or gone nowhere at all. Either way, the Abbey continues its day without urgency. And so do I. I stay where I am for a while, watching the sheep shift and settle like a single indecisive thought. They move together, then apart, then together again, as though they've all agreed to reconsider the same idea at the same time. Their wool is thick and uneven, patched with snow where it's decided to stay, and bare where it's already given up. The monk with the staff adjusts his grip slightly. Not much, just enough to remind the staff who's in charge. He doesn't say anything. Neither do I. There's a rule here, spoken or not, about footsteps. You don't rush them, you don't drag them, you let them land where they land. Quiet feet belong to people who aren't in a hurry to prove anything. I follow that rule as I move away from the sheep and along the outer wall of the Abbey. The stones are cold and damp, their edges softened by centuries of weather and hand. I trail my fingers along the surface for a moment, feeling grooves worn by people who leaned here while thinking about things they never wrote down. Somewhere inside the Abbey, something heavy shifts. A door closes, wood against wood. The sound is deep and final, but not dramatic, just another piece of the day sliding into place. I pass a stack of firewood neatly arranged beneath an overhang. Each log is similar in size, cut with care, stacked with patience. No one here wastes effort on unnecessary variety. Everything is the size it needs to be. Everything has already decided what it's for. A thin trail of smoke curls up from a chimney, pale against the winter sky. It doesn't rush upward. It drifts, lingers, pauses like it's waiting for instructions it will never receive. I stop again, because that seems to be what this place encourages, and listen. Wind in bare branches, distant sheep, the faintest murmur of voices far inside, too muted to form words. This is the hour between tasks, not officially, perhaps, but spiritually, the space where nothing is demanded and nothing is offered. It's a useful hour, a forgiving one. I adjust my cloak, not to warm myself, but because it feels like something a person would do when they've been standing still long enough to notice themselves again. The Abbey stands behind me. The snow stretches ahead. Neither one expects anything, and that makes walking forward feel optional, which, for now, feels just right. The path narrows again as I move farther along the Abbey's outer edge. Snow here hasn't been groomed by footsteps or softened by routine. It's uneven, lumpy in places, some pressed flat in others, like it tried several options before settling on none of them. I slow down even more. This kind of snow keeps you honest. It asks where you're putting your weight. It reminds you that walking is an agreement between balance and patience. I place each step carefully, listening for the soft crunch that tells me the ground has accepted it. The wall beside me leans inward just slightly, not enough to be concerning, but enough to feel companionable. Stones like these were laid with confidence, not perfection. Mortar fills the gaps where it can. Time fills the rest. I pass a narrow doorway I hadn't noticed before. It's low, meant for bending. Anyone entering here would have to bow automatically, whether they intended to or not. Inside, I glimpse stacked barrels, a coil of rope, a shovel with a handle polished smooth by years of the same grip. Tools resting between uses. In the 12th century, winter wasn't something you waited out. It was something you managed. Wood chopped ahead of time. Grain stored carefully. Wool spun and mended while daylight allowed. Nothing dramatic, just preparation repeated until it worked. A gust of wind moves through suddenly, lifting fine snow off the ground and sending it sideways in a quiet rush. It doesn't sting. It just rearranges things. I pause and let it pass, watching the path change shape slightly before my eyes. When the wind settles, I notice a single set of smaller footprints crossing mine at an angle. Lighter, closer together. Possibly a child. Possibly someone carrying something heavy and trying not to slip. They head toward the doorway I just passed. I don't follow them. Not every set of tracks needs an audience. Instead, I turn my attention forward again to where the path bends out of sight. The Abbey feels farther away now, though I know it hasn't moved. Distance here isn't measured in steps. It's measured in how much sound still reaches you. Very little does. I take another careful step, then another, letting the uneven snow decide the pace for me. And for the moment, that's enough direction. The small doorway along the wall keeps my attention longer than I expect it to. It's the kind of door that never fully commits to being open or closed. The wood is thick and worn, its surface scarred by hands that pushed and pulled it without ceremony. Snow has collected along the threshold, melted, then frozen again, creating a thin, uneven line like the door itself can't decide where it belongs. I stop beside it and listen. Nothing dramatic happens. No voices. No sudden movement. Just the faint creak of wood shifting slightly as the temperature changes. Inside reminds me of the spaces meant for storing things rather than people. Barrels stacked carefully. A sack tied with twine. A shovel leaned into a corner like it was told to wait there and took the instructions seriously. The air smells like earth and grain and damp rope. Practical smells. Honest ones. I don't go in. Instead, I lean my shoulder gently against the stone wall and stand there for a while, letting the cold seep in slowly rather than all at once. It feels earned that way. Snow drifts down in small flakes now. Nothing heavy, just enough to remind the ground it will need attention later. In the 12th century, doors like this were important. They separated daily labor from quiet reflection, inside from outside, work from rest, and sometimes, if you were lucky, they separated obligation from choice. I notice a faint set of handprints in the frost on the door's surface. Someone pushed it open earlier without gloves. Probably regretted it. Probably did it again the next day anyway. Routine has a way of dulling discomfort into something manageable. Farther down the wall, a bell rings again, not the main bell, not the one that governs prayer hours, but a smaller one. The kind used to signal a task completed or a shift beginning. I imagine someone setting down a tool, stretching their back, and moving on to the next quiet responsibility. I straighten and step away from the wall, my boots leaving shallow impressions beside older ones already half filled with snow. The path ahead curves gently, not hiding anything important, just offering more of the same. And I find that I don't mind that at all. Sometimes the most restful places are the ones that promise nothing new, and then keep that promise. I take another slow step forward, letting the Abbey remain behind me without fully leaving it. And for now, that feels like exactly enough. The farther I walk, the quieter everything becomes. Not the dramatic kind of quiet, the kind that feels like it's building toward something, but the settled kind. The kind that suggests whatever needed to happen already did. The wall beside me ends without ceremony. One moment it's there, steady and familiar, and the next it simply isn't. The path opens into a wider stretch of snow where the ground dips slightly and then rises again, as if the land itself is breathing slowly in and out. I stop at the edge of it. From here, I can still see part of the Abbey roof through the trees. Smoke drifts upward, thinner now, dispersing into the gray sky. It looks like the Abbey exhaling after a long morning of bells and work and measured silence. In the distance, a cart creaks somewhere, wooden wheels protesting the cold. Someone clears their throat. Somewhere else, water trickles beneath ice, doing its best impression of stillness. All of it exists without asking me to participate. I notice my shoulders have dropped at some point. I don't remember deciding to relax them. It just happened. The cold still presses in gently, but it feels less like an obstacle now and more like part of the arrangement. The snow here is mostly untouched. No footprints, no instructions. Just a blank stretch that doesn't expect to be filled in any particular way. I take one careful step forward and watch the snow give way, accepting the shape of my boot and then immediately beginning to soften it. That feels right. In places like this, in this time, space was allowed to remain empty. Silence wasn't something to fix. Stillness wasn't suspicious. If nothing happened for a while, that was considered success. I take another step, then another. Slow enough that each one feels like a suggestion rather than a decision. Behind me, the Abbey continues without noticing my absence. Ahead of me, the snow waits without urgency. And somewhere between the two, I keep walking, not toward anything in particular, but not away from it either. Just moving, at a pace the world seems comfortable with. I walk a little farther until the ground levels out and then decides, without consulting anyone, to dip again. It's subtle, just enough to make me adjust my stride, just enough to remind me that the land here isn't interested in convenience. The snow responds differently now. It's softer in this hollow, as if it's been collecting here longer. My boots sink just a bit deeper, and the sound changes. Less crunch, more hush. Snow like this feels attentive, like it's listening rather than reacting. I stop again. Of course I do. When you stop in a place like this, nothing rushes in to fill the gap. No one asks if you're lost. No one waves. No sheep wander through demanding commentary. The world simply waits to see what you'll do next, and seems perfectly fine if the answer is nothing. In the 12th century, this kind of pause wouldn't have been wasted time. It would have been folded into the day without remark. A moment between tasks, between prayers, between the thought of something and the act of it. I bend slightly and brush my glove across the surface of the snow. It holds the shape for a second, then relaxes. Nothing keeps its form for long here, and that feels intentional. A bird lifts from a nearby branch with a quiet flutter, not startled, just done resting there. The branch sways once, twice, then settles. Somewhere farther off, a dog barks exactly once and then seems to reconsider the decision. I straighten and look back toward the Abbey one more time. From this distance, it looks smaller. Not less important, just less demanding. Like something that's finished saying what it needed to say for now. I turn forward again and begin walking, leaving a slow, deliberate line of footprints behind me. I don't worry about where they lead. Snow is good at letting go of paths when it's ready. For now, I'm content to make them. One step, then another, and letting the quiet do most of the work. I don't notice at first when the path stops being a path, There isn't a clear moment where it ends and something else begins. It just gradually loses confidence. The snow spreads out, the ground stops suggesting where a foot ought to land, and suddenly I'm walking the long way around nothing in particular, which honestly feels familiar. I slow again, not because it's necessary, but because speed would feel rude here. The trees thin out slightly, their branches arching overhead like they started forming a tunnel and then lost interest halfway through. Snow clings to them in uneven patches, occasionally slipping off in soft little sighs when the weight becomes too much. One clump falls nearby. No drama, just gravity finishing a thought. I step around it and keep going. In places like this, people didn't walk unless they had a reason. Firewood, water, messages, livestock. Wandering was a luxury, and even then it was usually done with purpose. I imagine if someone saw me now, they'd assume I was headed somewhere specific. I let them. The air smells cleaner out here. Less stone, less smoke. More cold earth and distant water. Somewhere under all this snow, a stream is still moving, stubbornly refusing to freeze completely. You can hear it if you stand still long enough, a faint, constant whisper doing its best to sound like silence. I stop again. That seems to be the theme. My breath rises and fades. The snow accepts it without comment. No bells reach this far, no voices. Even the Abbey feels like a thought I had earlier, rather than something I just left. I realize I'm smiling slightly. Not because anything pleasant has happened. Nothing really has, but because nothing unpleasant has either. This stretch of time feels neutral in the best possible way. Unclaimed, unimpressed. I take another step, then another, choosing a direction mostly because it's there. The snow records it briefly, then begins preparing to forget. And I let it. For a while longer, I walk the long way around nothing at all, and find it surprisingly restful. The forest closes in a little more as I keep walking, not in a threatening way, just enough to feel deliberate. The trees lean toward one another like old friends who've decided the conversation doesn't need newcomers. Snow rests on every branch, balanced carefully, as if it knows exactly how much weight it's allowed to carry. The path curves again without asking my opinion. I follow it. There's a moment, right here, where the world feels especially settled. Not quiet in the way that feels empty, but quiet in the way that feels complete. Like everything that needs to be happening already is. My boots find firmer ground beneath the snow, packed earth, frozen leaves. The sound of my steps changes slightly, and I listen to it for longer than necessary, letting the rhythm stretch out. Each footfall lands, pauses, then releases. Somewhere to my left, something moves. Not quickly, just a small rustle. I stop and wait, and after a few seconds a hare appears at the edge of the trees. It freezes when it sees me, ears lifted, body already halfway through deciding whether to stay or go. We regard each other for a moment. I don't move. It doesn't move. Then, apparently satisfied that I am not worth the effort, it hops away, leaving a neat pattern of prints that head confidently into the undergrowth. They don't hesitate. They don't look back. That seems admirable. In the 12th century, forests like this weren't places you wandered casually. They were working spaces, hunting grounds, sources of fuel and food and quiet danger. People respected them by not lingering too long. I imagine the monks would walk these edges carefully, gathering what was needed and returning before daylight decided to leave. I keep walking, but the path is narrowing now, thinning into something more symbolic than practical. It still suggests a direction, but only barely. Soon it will stop pretending altogether. When it does, I slow to a stop and stand there, listening. Wind through branches. Snow settling. My own breathing, steady and unremarkable. The path has finished its job, and for the moment, that's perfectly fine. I stand there longer than I mean to. The forest doesn't seem to notice. Snow continues to rest on branches without sliding off. The air stays exactly as cold as it already decided to be. Nothing urges me forward, and nothing suggests I should turn back. It's a rare kind of permission, being allowed to remain undecided without consequence. Eventually, I do turn around, not abruptly, just a gradual pivot, like the thought arrives first and the body follows later once it's sure there's no rush. My footprints lead back the way I came, softened already at the edges. Snow has started the quiet work of unmaking them. That feels appropriate. I follow them anyway, slow and careful, letting each step land fully before lifting the next. The forest opens up again, reluctantly at first, then more generously. The Abbey comes back into view through the trees, its stone walls steady and unbothered by my brief absence. Smoke still drifts from the chimney. Someone, somewhere inside, is stirring something warm and repetitive. The bells do not ring. It isn't time. I return to the edge of the grounds where the snow is smoother and the paths remember themselves more clearly. The footprints that started all of this are nearly gone now. Filled in, blurred, reconsidered by the weather. Whatever made them has long since stopped leaving evidence. That's all right. I pause once more. Take in the quiet, the cold, the ordinary patience of the place. The Abbey will continue its hours. The sheep will continue disagreeing with winter. The snow will continue deciding which shapes it wants to keep and which it doesn't. And I will leave without disturbing any of that. Only then, when I'm certain there's nothing left to notice, I reach into my cloak and feel the smooth, familiar stone resting in my palm. It hums softly now, just enough to let me know it's time. Not loudly, not urgently, just present. I close my fingers around it. The snow doesn't react. The forest doesn't watch. The Abbey keeps breathing. And with that quiet agreement from the world, I let myself go, already knowing I'll return to another place where very little happens, and stay just long enough for it to matter. Good night.